I was just getting back from court, tired, dust-covered and craving silence, when I saw the ruin. My truck slowed to a crawl on the gravel, the tires crunching louder than usual. There, where my family's bridge had stood for 3 generations, was nothing. Gone.
Note damaged.
Not under repair. Gone. Wooden planks were scattered like bones across the riverbank. Some had already been swept downstream. Others lay snapped and half-submerged in the mud. I slammed the truck into park and jumped out, boots slipping in the dirt as I ran. That bridge wasn't just a shortcut across a narrow creek. My grandfather built it by hand. My father repaired it. I'd spent months restoring it with reclaimed wood and old blueprints. And it wasn't just family history, it was a protected historical structure under federal law. Now it was a pile of splinters. And there it was, nailed into a post near the wreckage, a bright orange sign with the HOA's smug logo, Lakeside Ridge Association, plastered across it. The note underneath was colder than the wind. Unauthorized structure removed for community safety.
LRA Compliance Division.
My hands were trembling as I pulled out my phone and started snapping photos.
Every angle. Every broken board.
I was furious, but not surprised. I'd seen this coming, just not like this.
A voice behind me broke my thoughts. Hey, Judge. You all right?
It was Martin, my ranch hand, and my friend. His eyes went wide as he took in the destruction. Looks like a damn tornado hit it, he muttered. No, I said, my voice flat. HOA did this. He blinked. Same ones who said they had no interest in your land? I nodded. Yeah. And now they've made a mistake they won't recover from. Because what they didn't know, what they couldn't have known, was that I wasn't just some dusty rancher with a sentimental attachment to an old bridge. I was a sitting federal judge. And they had just bulldozed a federally protected landmark. But I didn't tell them that. Not yet. That night, I walked into their polished glass office building like any other angry landowner. The receptionist didn't even look up when she said, "Can I help you?" "I'm here about the bridge on my property that your organization tore down." She typed something. "You're not listed as an HOA member, sir."
I'm Judge Carter.
And no, I'm not. Because my land isn't part of your subdivision. Now she looked up. Just then, a tall man stepped from the back office, balding, name tag shining, Ed Branson, HOA Vice President. "Is there a problem, sir?" he asked. I faced him calmly. "Yes, Ed. There is. Your organization just demolished a historic bridge, on private, federally protected land. Did you file anything with the state or federal preservation office?" Ed laughed. "That old thing? We got complaints. It was dangerous. We took initiative." "You took initiative to commit a federal crime." He scoffed. "Come on. If it's just about a permit." "It's not," I said, stepping closer. "You're outside your jurisdiction. My ranch isn't part of your community. Never has been." But he grinned. "Maybe it should be." That's when I knew it wasn't about safety. It was about power. They wanted my land. The bridge was just step one. That night, I made a call to a friend at the Department of the Interior. By morning, wheels were turning. The bridge had been registered for over 20 years. There were records, inspections, historical files. And now there was an open federal inquiry. But I wasn't finished. I set up trail cams.
Motion censor. Warning signe.
Because I knew Ed wasn't done. And 2 nights later, at exactly 12:17 a.m., one of the cameras sent an alert to my phone. 3 men. Flashlights. Clipboards. On my land.
The alert came through just after midnight, minuit 17 sharp.
I was sitting in my home office, reviewing federal case files, when my phone buzzed. One of the trail cams had triggered. I opened the app. There they were, 3 men, moving low along the creek bed. Flashlights pointed at the warning signs I'd posted just days earlier, federal property.
No trespassing.
One of them kicked a sign over like it offended him. Another was taking pictures. They weren't vandals. They were casing the land. Mapping it. Gathering evidence, I guessed, for some claim that the land was abandoned or communal.
Icaled Martin.
"Grab the ATV," I told him. "We've got company." We moved fast and quiet through the trees, headlights off, tires silent over the fallen leaves. It was cold, dry, and still. The kind of night you can feel deep in your chest. We spotted them near the old riverbank. 2 were scribbling notes. The third was sticking little colored flags into the dirt, marking boundary lines, I assumed. That's when I flipped the lights on. They froze like rabbits in a trap. One dropped his clipboard and bolted into the trees. The other 2 tried to play dumb. Sorry, one said. Didn't know this was private. You're trespassing on federally protected property, I said, lifting my phone and taking a photo of each of their faces. They didn't argue. They just ran. Martin chuckled. Picked the wrong ranch. The next morning I printed the photos, timestamped them, and added them to the growing file. Photos of the destroyed bridge, the HOA sign, the trespassers. The file was thick and damning. But I didn't get a chance to seal the envelope. Because around 4 p.m. that day, the back of the ranch shook with a boom so loud it rattled the windows.
Martin burst into my office, pale.
They blew up your shed. I didn't ask questions. I ran. When I got there, flames were already reaching for the sky. The old wooden structure, nothing fancy, just tools, feed, fencing wire, was engulfed. Smoke billowed in thick black clouds. The smell of burning chemicals filled the air. Martin was trying with a fire extinguisher.
He grabbed the hose from the barn.
It was pointless. The shed was gone. Not vandalized. Not burned accidentally. Detonated. There were scorch marks in the dirt, fragments of a blown-out gas can 20 yards from the blast site. Someone had used accelerants.
Maybe firework.
Maybe worse. They weren't sending a message anymore. They were declaring war. That night, I didn't sleep. Instead, I combed through every second of camera footage. And sure enough, there he was.
One of the same men from the trespassing incident, back again.
He was caught on cam sneaking toward the shed just before sunset.
And then, a blinding white flash. The explosion.
I screen recorded the clip, backed it up, and sent it to 2 people, my lawyer in D.C., and a contact at the U.S. Marshal's office. Because now it wasn't just about a bridge. This was arson on federal land. The next morning, I called the sheriff. A young deputy named Rob showed up. At first, he didn't know what to make of it, until I showed him my badge. "You're a federal judge?" he asked. I nodded. And that shed wasn't just on private land. It was on a parcel listed in the National Historical Registry. His radio crackled. He stepped aside to call in reinforcements. By noon, my property was crawling with state police and the bomb squad. They confirmed it. The explosion was deliberate.
Still, not a word from the HOA.
Not a call. Not a letter. Nothing. They were quiet now. Too quiet. It felt like standing at the edge of a cliff, waiting for a wave to hit. I knew it was coming. I just didn't know from which direction. And I was right. Because what came next wasn't another fire or trespass. It was digital sabotage. 2 nights after the shed exploded, I was sitting in my study, reviewing court dockets on my laptop, when the internet suddenly cut out. At first, I thought it was the storm rolling in. But then I checked my phone. Full bars. Hotspot worked fine. That's when I heard it. The low hum of a diesel engine just outside the fence line. I stepped outside with a flashlight and walked up the hill toward the utility pole at the edge of my ranch. And there they were, 4 men in yellow vests, lowering a metal box into the back of a Ridgem truck. That booster box wasn't theirs. It was part of the infrastructure I paid for, installed by my service provider, not the HOA's. "Hey!" I shouted, making them freeze. "What do you think you're doing?" One man, clearly the lead, looked up. "We're from Ridgem. Got a work order from Lakeside Ridge Association. Just collecting old equipment." I pulled up my parcel map on my phone. "This land isn't part of your coverage zone. And that box isn't HOA property, it's mine. Show me who gave you permission to enter." He stammered. HOA office said it was pre-approved." I started filming. "So you're admitting, on record, to removing private property based on an order from someone who doesn't own the land?" He blanched. "It's probably just a misunderstanding." They packed up fast and left. But it was no misunderstanding. It was another attempt to isolate me.
Strip my access. Contrôle my communication. Digital sabotage. Plein and simple.
The next morning, I filed a formal complaint, with video evidence, boundary maps, and witness statements. I sent it to the same federal contacts handling the arson and trespassing. That same day, Martin came back from town with a letter. The look on his face said it all. "Judge," he said, handing me the envelope, "you're gonna want to sit down." Big red stamp across the top. Notice of property foreclosure intent. Inside, a claim from the Lakeside Ridge HOA for over $27,000 in back dues, violation fines, and late penalties.
Fabricated. Every word of it.
They claimed I owed them for community maintenance, aesthetic violations, and unauthorized structures, on land they had no jurisdiction over. But the worst part?
The final line.
If payment is not received within 30 days, HOA has the right to initiate seizure of property as per community standards.
My at-5.
They were trying to take the land.
My family's land. The ranch my father built.
The bridge my grandfather swore would connect us for generations. And that night, as the wind howled across the empty riverbank, I sat on the porch, boots propped on the railing, and whispered to the dark.
You wanted a war? Fin.
I stood up,
Walked inside.
pulled open the bottom drawer of my filing cabinet, and took out the sealed envelope I'd been saving for a moment like this. An order, signed by me, prepared for execution by someone else. A federal injunction. I called the one man who could activate it. "Marshall Wilkins," I said. "You still got an empty docket for property disputes?" He didn't miss a beat. "Send everything you've got," he replied. "I'll open the file first thing in the morning." By sunrise, the case was on the federal docket. The HOA wasn't just being investigated for nuisance and overreach anymore. They were being investigated for federal crimes: arson, trespassing, destruction of a historical landmark, attempted seizure of private property, and now, fraudulent legal filings. Still, I kept it quiet. Let them believe they were winning. Let them keep digging their own grave. Because they had no idea that by coming after my land, they'd stepped into the crosshairs of the very system they thought they could manipulate. And then came the next knock at my door. Not a neighbor. Not law enforcement. It was a man in a suit, clipboard in hand. "Good morning," he said.
Amir from the Lakeside Ridge Association.
"We're proposing new zoning changes." I smiled without warmth. "You're on the wrong property, friend." He didn't flinch. "We intend to absorb adjacent properties into the new community district, including yours." I folded my arms.
You blew up my shed. You tore down my bridge.
"You've trespassed, Leet. And now you want to offer a proposal." He smiled, but his eyes twitched. We were hoping to avoid legal action. "Too late," I said, and shut the door in his face. By the time I shut that door in the clipboard man's face, I already knew what was coming next. And I was ready. That same afternoon, I received an email from Ed Branson, the HOA's vice president. It was laced with legal jargon and fake politeness, but I knew exactly what it was: a cover-up attempt. A weak one at that. Due to recent misunderstandings between our compliance division and local residents, we are offering a community-wide meeting to resolve any disputes in a civil and neighborly fashion. I didn't even reply. Instead, I forwarded it directly to the U.S. Attorney's Office, along with everything else: the trespass footage, the explosion, the digital sabotage, the fake foreclosure. That night, while I was working in the barn, my internet went out again.
Only this time, I knew better.
I walked outside with a flashlight and saw a crew of men in yellow vests at the telecom pole again. Different faces, same game. One of them was removing a device from the pole, something not even registered to the HOA. I caught them on camera. Again. They ran when I mentioned federal theft of infrastructure. But they had already revealed what I needed to know. They weren't just targeting my property. They were targeting my ability to fight back. The next morning I filed a second formal complaint, this time, not just with DOJ, but with the FAA and FCC. I included drone interference logs, provider tampering, and another set of trail cam stills showing new trespassing at night.
And then Martin came running from the edge of the ranch, a letter in hand.
"Judge. They're at it again." It was another foreclosure threat, same fake language, same forged signatures, but now with a 14-day deadline and intent to seize assets. They weren't just threatening anymore. They were executing their plan. But they had forgotten one thing. I wrote the rules they were breaking. That night, I sat at the kitchen table and reviewed the sealed federal injunction. Then I called Marshal Wilkins again. "They've escalated," I told him. He didn't even ask how. "Copy that. We'll act fast." The next morning, my ranch was quiet. Too quiet.
Until the knock came at my door.
This time, it wasn't a clipboard or a phony letter. It was a white SUV with no plates, and a man inside wearing sunglasses and a too-clean blazer. He rolled down his window just enough. "You're making a lot of noise for someone who used to be so quiet," he said.
I stepped closer. "Who are you?"
He gave a tight smile.
Let's juste c'est un friand of the association.
"Thought you might want to settle this off the record." Martin appeared behind me. "You threatening a federal judge?" The man didn't answer. He just rolled up his window and drove off, tires spitting gravel. That was it. I was done playing defense. The next morning, I held a press conference. Standing beside the scorched remains of the shed, I looked into a sea of cameras and reporters and said, "This isn't about one bridge. Or one ranch. It's about unchecked power. About corruption inside small systems that think no one will stop them. But someone can."
And someone will.
Emails flooded in from across the country. Veterans.
Single mom.
Retirees. People with their own HOA horror stories. Threats, fines, illegal liens, even home seizures over garden beds and paint colors. This wasn't just about me anymore.
And the DOJ knew it.
That afternoon, I got a call from Hannah Thomas, the lead investigator on my case. "We've opened a multi-agency task force on HOA overreach. Yours might be the first case we bring to federal court." I nodded.
Tell me what you need.
"We're coming for a full walkthrough." When the team arrived, 3 black SUVs, cameras, equipment, federal agents, they took over the ranch for 6 hours. They documented everything. The demolished bridge.
The blown-up shed. The telecom tampering.
The forged notices.
The night trespassé.
And every sign the HOA had vandalized. When we reached the far corner of the property, Hannah pointed to the post where the telecom box had been removed. "They drilled into your land."
Not juste un plug jed. Temperuis burier infrastructure.
She looked up at me and said, "They're done." And yet, that night, just as we were closing up the barn, Martin ran in, out of breath. "You need to see this." We sprinted to the north pasture. The gate was wide open. Chain cut. The cattle were gone. We drove for miles, sweeping the fields with headlights, calling into the dark. It took hours, but we got most of them back, spooked, scattered, but alive. And that's when I made my final decision.
No more défense.
The time for lawsuits was over. It was time to swing the gavel. 2 weeks later, the courtroom was packed. Lawyers. Reporters.
Local.
Even a few ranchers from miles out showed up to witness what everyone was calling the HOA trial. It wasn't just about a bridge anymore. Or even land. This was about power. Abuse. And the reckoning that was long overdue. I sat quietly at the plaintiff's table in a simple suit, no robe, no pomp. Just a man with a case. Across the aisle, Ed Branson strutted in like he was still in charge, flanked by 3 lawyers. That smug grin never left his face. He still didn't get it. The presiding judge stepped in, Janet Miller, a colleague and an iron-spined jurist with no time for nonsense. She gave me a brief nod.
Case number 441 FJ, Carter versus l'Acquisition Ridge Association.
We'll now hear the motion for emergency injunction.
My attorney, Ethan Grant, Rose.
He spoke with clarity, composure, and surgical precision. Your Honor, the defendant destroyed a federally protected landmark, trespassed multiple times on private land, tampered with utilities, committed arson, and attempted illegal foreclosure. All under false jurisdiction. The room fell silent as he laid out the evidence.
Surveillance faux otage.
Fake foreclosure notices. Maps proving my land was outside HOA lines. Audio from telecom workers admitting theft. Photos of the scorched shed.
Treilles en styles of nighttime trespassé.
And a signed confession from the man who offered me a $5,000 settlement. When he finished, no one moved. Ed's lawyer stood sweating and tried to spin the narrative as a zoning misunderstanding and clerical errors. Judge Miller raised an eyebrow. Clerical error led to explosive sabotage and fabricated liens. He stammered. She cut him off.
IVR de neuf.
She slammed her gavel. An immediate injunction is granted. Lakeside Ridge HOA is hereby ordered to cease all actions involving Mr. Carter's property, including financial claims, digital access, or physical trespass. Any further contact will be considered a federal offense.
Edes face craqued.
Reporters scrambled to get statements. Residents whispered. I stood up, nodded to the judge, and walked out. But that was just the beginning.
The very next day, my story hit national headline.
Federal judge sues HOA over arson, fraud, and land grab. Emails flooded in. People from across the country shared their stories. Flags removed, pets banned, driveways scrutinized, lives ruined over petty rules. My case became the symbol. But the HOA wasn't done yet. One night, Martin and I were fixing a gate when a black SUV pulled up slowly, no plates. A man rolled down the window, well-dressed, dead-eyed. You're making a lot of noise, he said. Maybe let this go. Martin reached for the rifle in the truck bed.
Il stepped forward. You're frais. Det is what this is. Desperation.
He didn't answer. Just drove off. That night, I filed another report. We weren't just dealing with HOA board members. This was organized, backed by shadow developers, people who specialized in hostile rural takeovers. The DOJ confirmed it a week later. Judge Carter, the HOA was funded by an offshore firm tied to luxury real estate developers. It's deeper than we thought. They froze their accounts. But retaliation came in another form: drones.
Small black ones.
Buzzing low over my barn and porch. One even dropped a blinking black device, a tracker. We captured 7 drones in total. Each one tied to shell companies with links to the developers. But they were too late. Because the bridge, our bridge, was finished. On a cool Sunday morning, with friends, neighbors, reporters, and even shop class students from the local high school, we held a ceremony.
He drove the golden nail into the final beam himself.
We raised an American flag from the rafters of the barn and planted it over the handrail. Inscribed on a bronze plaque were my grandfather's words. To my sons and grandsons, may this bridge always keep our family connected, no matter what storms try to tear it down. People cried. People clapped. And for the first time in a long time, I felt peace. But as we packed up, a black car pulled into the driveway. A man in a sharp suit stepped out, handed me a briefcase, and left without a word. Inside was a letter from a development firm. An offer. 7 figures. Enough to buy 10 more ranches. I folded it and tossed it into the creek. Because some things are not for sale. Not land. Not family. Not legacy. And not justice. Days later, the DOJ made it official. Federal RICO charges. Wire fraud. Mail fraud. Conspiracy. Real estate racketeering. HOA board members.
Développeurs.
Investors. All under indictment. Congress introduced the Homeowner Fairness Act, federal oversight for HOAs with over 100 properties. And the man who said I'd fold? He now sits in federal prison. But me?
I still walk across that bridge every morning with my boots muddy, my coffee hot, and my conscience clean.
Because I didn't scream the loudest. I didn't fight the dirtiest. I just stood my ground. And proved, once and for all, that you don't mess with a man's home. And you sure as hell don't tear down his bridge.